All right, guys, it is Thursday, September 14th, 2023. So I'm getting ready to get started on Steve's chassis again. I'm going to try to get the engine and trans removed. I'm going to break the transmission and engine apart from each other, separate them, try to get the engine set up on an engine stand, and then I don't know how much time I'm going to have off of that, but I need to weld up the front of the motor mounts as well to the frame. There's rain coming. Looks like on the forecast hourly it's going to be around 1 o'clock when it's going to roll in here, so I do have a few hours that I can get out there and get something done. So and then I'll have to wrap up the chassis. I was wanting to primer the top of the chassis today as well, but I'm just not going to have time. So we get started. All right, guys, so I got the engine and trans out, and I've got the torque converter bolts out of it. And when I pull them both together like this and I'm getting ready to separate the two, I get it up there, and of course I take the bolts out, the 3 torque converter bolts out, and then I always reach up in there and kind of push the torque converter back away from the flex plate a little bit, and then I like to turn it. And I don't know if you guys can hear that. That does not sound good. So a dirt dauber nest fell out of this a minute ago, and I threw it out in the yard, but it was a little one. So I'm kind of hoping there's a dirt dauber nest stuck in there. Now, obviously when I pull the transmission off, I'm going to pull the torque converter because I'm going to put a new front pump seal in it anyway before I put the torque converter back in it. But I'll be replacing the rear and the front pump seal. And anyway, I don't like the sound of that. They're not supposed to sound that, gritty like that. But I mean, this thing has set for a long time without, being messed with. Me and Steve did get it running at one point, but we only let it run like 10 seconds. So anyway, I don't know why those guys painted this cast iron gray. This is most likely the Duplicolor aerosol cast iron gray that you can get at any parts store. Transmissions to me, they're aluminum. So some of them, the ones I mess with are, I'll say that. I would have painted this aluminum, but it's just me. I mean, that's builder preference, or whatever, but they painted everything. They painted the cable right here. They painted the trans mount. I mean, they painted it all. Look at the overspray flaking off of the black deal, and that's up on top of the intake that you see. So I'm going to try to go in there and clean all this off with some enamel reducer, because lacquer thinner would be too harsh on the plastic, so the reducers usually seem to be a little bit softer on that stuff. But anyway, I'll try to clean that off the best I can. But I would love to paint this silver color. I do have I have some base coat paint in there that's called platinum pearl. That's what I've painted many of my transmissions with. It's really neat color. It almost looks like aluminum, but it has a little bit of pearl in it, because the engine does have pearl. But I'll have to find out if he wants to go through that kind of a trouble, because it'll take me a few hours to clean it all up and scuff it down and paint it. But if he doesn't want to, we can just stick it right back in there just like it is. It doesn't matter to me. But anyway, hopefully when I get that converter out, it'll be good. But you'll see that here pretty shortly. So I went out and got my engine stand out of my fenced area. This thing just sets out in the weather. This thing is pretty much mostly bulletproof, we'll say. I have had this engine stand for a long time. I got this in about 1995 from a friend of mine, Jeff Carroll, and I cannot tell you how many engines I have put together on this stand. It's a bunch. But I ended up getting another one, and it's the traditional style, the smaller one, because this one's kind of big. Anyway, I've got my wife's 305 HO on it for her 4-door. So this is the one I'm going to use for Steve's 327. But anyway, I'm going to get these two separated, get the engine put on there, and then I'm going to put the transmission on one of these roll around wheel dollies. These are awesome if you're not using some, you know what I mean? Like if you're not using them on your car, those are awesome to put transmissions on or engine blocks on, so you can move them around. I've got a 350 sitting over there on one of them right now. But anyway, that's what I'm going to put that tranny on, is that. But I'm going to replace the rear seal and the front pump seal, so I'll pull the torque converter out, put a new front pump seal in it, and then I'm resealing the engine. These well, just about any GM transmission, there's a couple of seals that can cause all kinds of problems with leaks that just never seem to end. So there's a shift shaft seal that goes in here, and these are kind of a bear to get out of there. This most likely will need replaced as well. And there's two different seals going on here. So there's a seal down inside here for this inner plastic speedo gear into this metal housing. There's also an O-ring on that, but anyway, this would all have to come apart. And the bad thing on these 700R4s, these are plastic. The ones I have seen are plastic. I may have one in there with a steel in it, but I can't remember. But anyway, I tried to remove one of these from a plastic one from a transmission before, and I broke it. So I don't think I'm going to be replacing any of the seals in that. This one, I would like to reseal it. You can kind of see that shift shaft seal right there on the edge. But like I said, they are a bit of a pain to get out, you know, from out here without pulling the pan and all that kind of stuff. But I have done it before. It's just a pain in the butt. It wouldn't be too bad to change it on the car either, but and I may have one of them seals. I'll look around. If I have an extra shift shaft seal, I might go ahead and stuff it in there. But so I don't know. Yeah, these were on there when they painted it, but I don't know if these are loose or not. So it's for me, every time I mess with a transmission that I'm not familiar with, I always remove these, clean these up inside and out, and then I put just a little bit of thread sealant on there. Not Teflon tape, I use the paste stuff, just a little bit, and then run them back down. Because you never know, you know, you get a transmission and somebody went to loosen off the nut off of it, it might have turned this a little bit, so you don't know if that's loose, and then you put the car together and start it, and then transmission fluid's going everywhere. And when it comes from one of these, it gets down in here, and you don't know if your throttle valve cable seal's leaking, your transmission dipstick's leaking, or the line's leaking. So it kind of creates a little bit of a mess trying to figure out where it's coming from, especially when you're laying on your back under the car looking up in there trying to see, you know what I mean? So I'm just going to do a little preventative thing so I don't have to worry about having a leak there. So I'm going to get this thing broke apart. Alright guys, I'll give you a better shot of them engine mounts. So I used the tube off a different set of mounts than these. Now these mounts here actually go further out on the frame cradle than the other set did, so that's why I used the CPP bases. They were just a little bit longer out here, but I used the tube off the first set on the CPP ones, and that was to take out all the slack. Anyway, when I welded that on there, there's obviously just a little spot, so I put these, this is the same thickness of plate that this is, so I cut a piece out and welded it up there and there on the there, and then it's also welded on the back side. So I done both of them. I got a little bit of spatter I want to clean off there, but you know, definitely pretty stout, I think. But I'm going to go ahead and weld this front section of the mount on. That way they're welded and bolted. So I was talking about it in the video yesterday. The engine mounts, the CPP ones, they had a different style setup for the bolt to go through, and it had an oval slotted hole in the mount, so your bolt would have all kinds of slack in it. Also, the engine mounts, the rubber isolators are slotted, so when you put two slotted things together, there was like, I don't know how much movement together in there, and I was just afraid the engine would end up shifting to the left or to the right and get set in there kind of crooked or something, you know, because when you gas an engine, like if you rev it up or get on it or whatever, it's the left side of your engine it goes up. So it all depends on how good your engine mounts are. You know, these engine mounts came with that first set of motor mount set. This came with those, and these are very thin. They're very thin, so I'm hoping they don't break. And I've actually had one break on me on a 57 Chevy Bel Air I had. I got on it real hard and it broke the engine mount. It just made a thunk sound when you get on it or gas it, and I found out the rubber had separated from the steel. In case you don't know, these rubber isolated engine mounts, and even the urethane ones like Energy Suspension makes, these do not ground your chassis to your engine. These are separated by rubber. So it's an isolation between the two. So if you put a, you know, like a meter on this, put a probe on here, and then you put a probe on here, it will not squawk at you because it's separated. So unless you're running a solid steel, like a racing solid mount, these rubber isolated ones, you do have to put a separate ground on your engine to your chassis. So keep that in mind. Alright guys, so I never did really find a smoking gun for that grinding sound in here. I don't know, the hub doesn't have any gouge marks or anything in it, which I'll emery cloth this before I reinstall it after the new seal's put in. But they've put a new seal in, and I gotta tell you, this looks like, to me, this transmission's been rebuilt, because this front pump is clean, man. You can see oil marks up here, most likely from the rear main seal leaking and running back and hitting the converter and throwing it on here. So anyway, this thing looks new. It still has the lock, the retainer on it for the front seal, which is kind of cool because these are usually missing. But anyway, I'll pop this off. I'll put a new front pump seal in anyway, because, you know, this one could be dried out a little bit from as long as the car's been sitting. Anyway, I'll put a new O-ring on the end of this as well. But anyway, I don't see anything that would cause that grinding sound. It has fluid in it. You can see the fluid down in there. So it's not a dry converter. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put the converter back in it, just to, you know, so no dirt gets in either one of them. But looks like the seal is cracked there and there and there and there. But again, you know, it's been sitting. It could probably use new gaskets. But I do wonder about this being rebuilt. Maybe they had it rebuilt and Steve don't remember. I don't know. I have to ask him about that. But You know, for a used transmission, this was in his car before, I would expect that to be just really, really dirty. This is just paint overspray right here from where they painted the transmission cast iron gray. I don't know, man. But I can't find any reason for it to be making noise. I did see a little bitty scratch mark right here, but I mean, it does have a counterweight welded on it right here, but I don't see any marks on it or any aluminum shavings on it. So, I mean, there's a lot of space between that. I wouldn't think that would hit, but who knows? Anyway, no smoking gun. I think I'm going to go ahead and post, or put a video together and post it, because I did turn the camera on the record with on the tripod for me working there, so they usually get a little long. And to save time, I don't think I'm going to edit anything. I'm just going to put all the clips together. But anyway, I'm going to keep working. It was supposed to rain at about 1, and it's noon now, so I mean, I got quite a bit done for that little bit of time, but I need to pull all this stuff off the front of the engine. I was going to go ahead and sand on some body filler and get, you know, go back over the top of the frame where it's bare metal with my nylon cut brush and clean it back up real clean and get it primered. But if it's going to rain, I can't primer it. So what I think I'm going to do is continue working on the engine. I might go ahead and break it apart, but I got to pull the harmonic balancer and the pulley and stuff off, and then I got to pull the oil pan, the timing cover. I think the best thing to do would be to go ahead and just get an engine gasket kit. It's going to be cheaper anyway, because if I just bought an oil pan gasket and actually I'm going to put a 1-piece oil pan gasket on it instead of the 4-piece thing, so it's still going to be cheaper to do that. But I'll get all new water pump gaskets, intake gaskets, valve cover gaskets, everything. So I'm just going to do that, just get an engine gasket set. But it'll come with a rear main, because if you piece all that out, it'll be way more money than it is to buy the new Felpro kit. So I'm probably going to go ahead and pull the intake manifold off and reseal it as well, because who knows if it's even put on right, you know what I mean? But like this one, there's a little gasket behind this, and you can tell that this was painted on it, and it even had the fuel pump on it. Of course, it's got a new fuel pump on it now, but when they painted this engine, the original fuel pump was still on it. So they did change the bolts. So, you know, again, breaking a seal to change bolts. So I might as well just get a kit, and it'll come with all these seals and everything. But I will have to get a Felpro 1-piece rubber pan gasket, and those things are pretty pricey. But to me, they're the best. Kind of a less of a headache and less of a mess, but they're worth the money, I think. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut the video off, and I guess I'll get in there and start making lunch. I'm getting pretty hungry. I need to take my dog out, too. Thanks for watching.